Coming up, finding clues this home in Maine had a wealthy past. But is it also full of treasure?
I'd place the value of your chandelier at...
Our expert shocks them with the answer.
Hi, I'm Mike Siegel. Buying a Grand Victorian was a dream come true for our first homeowners. Inside, they found high-end furnishings, chandeliers, and stained glass windows. So, they just had to find out who left it all there and what it's all worth.
Frank Iskonitis and PJ Walter were ready to trade in their big city lives for something totally different. That something turned out to be this Queen Anne Victorian in Rockland, Maine.
We literally walked in the front door and looked at each other and said, this is the place.
The 6,000 square foot house, complete with a grand turret, was built in 1892. Frank and PJ couldn't wait to move in and run it as an inn. And they were surprised to find the 19th century fixtures and original woodwork in such incredible condition.
As you walk around the house and you see the level of detail that went into the finishes, you realize the wealth that existed with this family.
But they didn't know exactly who that family was. Soon, they'd begin uncovering the mystery behind all that wealth. And much of what they found was in plain sight. Their first shock came when they found out how much the house was worth when it was built over a century ago.
The original assessed value on the house when it was built in 1892 was $4,800.
That's a bargain by today's standards, but back then, the house must have belonged to a family with deep pockets. The 6-foot-tall mirror in the entryway was the first clue to their status, especially when Frank and PJ discovered how much it was originally worth.
$400 of that assessment was attributed to the mirror that's hanging in the foyer here. So 10% of the budget went into one single item. It's pretty significant. The mirror clearly is the most exciting piece of the house.
Frank and PJ wonder what it's worth today and about the chandelier in the dining room.
We had discovered that this was an original chandelier to the house. We found an old picture of a young girl's birthday party in the dining room, and the chandelier was in the photo.
Could that be valuable too? They'd find out later, but not before they finished exploring the sprawling estate. While cleaning out the attic, Frank made a huge discovery. The name Field was written on one of the walls.
There was actually a board, a trim piece, that was nailed to one of the windows, and you could tell it had been broken in half. Field was painted on this board.
After looking up an old deed, they found out that the original owner of the house was Charles Littlefield.
That kind of firmed up for us that Charles Littlefield was a resident in this home.
But who was Charles Littlefield, and how did he make enough money to afford such a lavish home? He obviously didn't spare any expense, especially when he put this stained glass window in the living room.
As soon as you walk into the living room, your eyes are drawn up to this piece. There's two elements that make it special. First, its sheer size, but also what it represents. It's harvest time, it's prosperity. You're just drawn right to it and captivated by it.
Considering all the rich colors and intricate work, it must be valuable too.
It's hard to tell what this piece might be worth. I might think a couple of $1,000s at least.
Upstairs, the guys found another stained glass window with cobalt blue crystal detailing. They believe both windows are original to the house. And that's not all that glittered, so did the home's gilded radiators.
This was a gentleman that really liked to show his wealth, and he did it in every detail, including something so simple as a radiator in his home.
But when they found an old photo of the house, they realized something huge was missing. The turret that stands out front. How did that get there?
This kind of intrigued us, so we went to our local town hall and looked at tax records and discovered that this was actually an addition done 4 years after the house is completed. Normally you would add on to a house to create more space, but this was done purely for an aesthetic reason.
The turret was another sign of the original owner, Charles Littlefield's wealth. But who was he? They did a little research and discovered he was a 4-term U.S. congressman, and his career didn't end there.
He became Attorney General for the state of Maine and really was a prominent figure in Maine's history.
That explains the home's expensive stained glass windows and chandeliers. They also learned how that elaborate entryway mirror got there.
The mirror was a gift from from Mr. Littlefield to his wife Clara. And being politically prominent, appearances were very important. And so being able to have that ability to take that one last glance as you got to the front door, it served a very useful purpose.
As Charles grew in political and social prominence, he wanted his house to reflect his growing stature. That's why he added the turret in 1896. Now that they know their Victorian home had a prominent political past, they're wondering if all those high-end features left behind might be worth a fortune. And they're about to find out.
Hi, I'm Sherry.
Because we invited appraiser Sherry Elliott over to tell them what it's all worth.
Come on in.
Will Frank and PJ get good news? Will their stained glass windows shatter the price barrier?
I don't see any cracks whatsoever. That's unusual.
Will their mirror command a gigantic price?
I think this is the biggest hall mirror I've ever seen.
They'll have to wait until Sherry's done investigating to find out. Still ahead, will Frank and PJ get good news about their antique treasures?
That value would be...
Our expert tells them what it's all worth. Next on If Walls Could Talk.
Frank Isgonitis and PJ Walter were in for a big surprise when they bought their Victorian. Inside, they found stunning chandeliers, a mirror, and stained glass windows. Now comes the real surprise, as our expert drops by to tell them what it's all worth.
Frank and PJ were determined to leave their big city life behind for a slower pace as innkeepers. So they headed up to Rockland, Maine, and bought this 1892 Queen Anne Victorian. But they had no idea they were buying a slice of Maine's political past until they hit the history books and learned it was built in the 1890s for a prominent U.S. congressman named Charles Littlefield.
It sort of explained how ornate the house is and how outstanding it is for the neighborhood and the area that someone so prominent would want to live here.
Frank and PJ were surprised he left behind some of the home's original fixtures and furnishings, including stained glass windows, a huge mirror, and elaborate chandeliers. Now they can't help wondering what all that stuff is worth. And they're about to find out.
Hi, I'm Sherry.
Because we invited appraiser Sherry Elliott over to tell them what they've got, starting with that supersized mirror.
I love this enormous mirror that you have in here.
Thank you.
It's got a nice oak frame. It has a gesso shell and dart liner. That's the silvered part in the interior.
Frank and PJ learned the mirror was a Christmas gift from the original owner to his wife in 1892. Back then it was valued at the princely sum of $400. But what does Sherry think?
I place your enormous hall mirror at about $500 to $800.
$800. The guys are hoping for better news on that chandelier in the dining room. Sherry believes it dates to the early 20th century.
We have this beautiful Louis XV style gilt chandelier. It has 8 arms and beautiful hand-cut crystal drops.
Sounds promising, but is it?
I place the value of your chandelier at right around $1,500 to $2,000.
Wow, that's great.
$2,000? That's amazing for a chandelier that was left hanging around the house. Next, Sherry checks out the stained glass window in the living room.
It's got an unusual motif, the apple tree and the apples on it, which makes it kind of neat and unusual. Also, the size is a little bit unique too. For a transom window, they're usually a little bit smaller.
Sherry believes it was made by a local craftsman in 1892, but is it worth a lot of money today?
That value would be $5,000.
Wow, that's incredible.
$5,000? Does that mean the stained glass window upstairs is worth just as much?
Oh, these are gorgeous. It's a little bit smaller and a little less intricate, but it does have those cobalt faceted pieces in the center, which does make it a little bit more interesting. It's worth about $3,000.
Wow. Wow. Again, I'm just amazed.
Yeah.
$3,000! It's adding up fast. And altogether, Sherry's found nearly $11,000 worth of fixtures and furnishings left behind in the home. But to owners PJ and Frank, they're worth more than just the dollar amount.
What's more important to us is what each of them means as they're all represented together here as part of the house. And for us, that makes them priceless because they really are unique to us and unique to LimeRock Inn and unique to the Littlefields who put them here. We feel like we're curators in a living museum that's meant to be enjoyed and used.
And if Frank and PJ have their way, those pieces will remain the focal point of this 100-year-old estate for many more years to come.